Good evening. The opinions and statements voiced by our guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of this network. Enjoy the shows.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk only on Paranormal Experience Radio. Broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
And welcome to the Full Spectrum Project. I am your host, Brian Clune, and I am joined by...
You're joined by Pete Haviland here in the great state of Texas.
And apparently an armadillo's got your tongue. But
yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Why am I
by the way, we are live tonight. We are not. This is you. You are not hearing a taped recording of past shows. This is
a rebroadcast.
We are
yes.
live. Rebroadcast. That's the word. Just kick me and I'll get it out.
Oh God! Don't tempt me.
I know.
I will be coming back to Texas, and I can kick quite well.
Yeah, those pointed toes really do a good job.
As long as your Great Dane is not there, he scares me.
Yes, he will be there next time.
All right, maybe I won't be there in April. I'll think about it.
I keep asking you to send me something with your scent on it, and you haven't done it yet.
Well, hey, you know what? I asked you to send me one of your slippers so I could train my dog, and you didn't do it either. So don't start with me on that.
Okay, well,
So,
in case everybody's wondering, we were at the HHL convention in Jefferson, Texas, and we finally got to meet each other after talking with each other for months or even more than a year, and we actually liked each other, if you believe it or not.
Well, at least that's what I told you, but you're very gullible. Luckily.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And a gentleman that we also met, I've met him several times, but Brian finally got to meet was Mitchel Whitington, who we're going to be talking with this evening.
Yes, we actually interviewed Mitchel once before, but when Pete told me about this one book that you did, Mitchel, and I'm sorry, we should introduce Mitchel. Say hello, Mitchel.
Hello, everybody. And by the way, guys, it really was a lot of fun to get to spend some time with you at the conference, the History Haunts and Legends Conference. And I should mention, the way I met Brian was I was bringing all my stuff in from my table, boxes of books, and I'm bringing in the last box, and Brian came up and said, "Can I help you?" And I was like, "Well, I appreciate that, but I've already got it done." And he said, "Oh, I'm Brian." And I said, "Oh, you're Brian." So it really was, sincerely, I really enjoyed the day. So I'm looking forward to seeing you guys again.
Yeah, believe me,
it
was a real pleasure to meet you. And like we were talking before the show started, my timing is getting really good, so I end up looking like a really good guy without having to do a thing. So that's starting to work well for me.
So you're like, I think that's Mitch's last box, so I can go meet him now.
Little does Mitch know that he had been scoping him out probably for over an hour.
I'm wondering, did I actually just say that out loud?
That was your outside voice. That was your outside voice. You need to work on your inside voice.
Yeah, one of these days I'll learn. But you know what? Now I completely forgot what I was going to say.
See, that doesn't happen that often.
This is what happens when you get old. But I will tell you, my wife and I went on a 2-week road trip to get out there. Right, so it was
survived.
Which is kind of amazing in and of itself. So, we took the 10 out to Jefferson for as much as we could, and then had to cut up through Fort Worth and some of the other roadways. And then on the way back, we went up to Amarillo, met some friends that we have living there, and took Route 66 back. And it was really kind of a long trip, and we did enjoy it. But I got to admit, and Pete knows how I am as far as my animals and stuff go. When I got back, I think I missed my kitties the most, which was really weird. But here's one of the weird things. So I get home and the cats are kind of, well, some of them were like looking at me like you're a butt. We're not going to have anything to do with you. Then there were a couple that wouldn't leave me alone, and it got me thinking about this one goldfish I had years ago. Have either of you guys had a goldfish?
Yeah, a long time ago.
Yeah, as a wee lad.
Yeah. So this was a long time ago that I had this goldfish. But I got to thinking about how cool this goldfish was. I mean, it actually would
Mitch,
start.
get ready, it's coming.
No. Anyway, it would start breakdancing on the carpet, and I mean, it was really cool. Now, granted, okay, so it only did it for 20 seconds and once, but you guys should have seen it. It was great. I really miss that goldfish.
Oh boy. Okay.
Yeah, that was bad. Moment of that was a dad joke, right?
Was it? I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh God, Mitch! It looks like he's setting it up for the rest of the show.
I would never.
It'll be just as much fun as it was last time, I can tell. I really enjoyed it. I had a great time, so I'll look forward to the same tonight.
This is.
I'm putting a cross over you right now. There you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so Mitch, I kind of want to get into this. When I was doing some research on, because I had never even heard of H.L. Hunt before, and when I started doing research into H.L. Hunt and the book that you co-wrote, I was just fascinated with everything that went on. What was it that got you involved with writing this book? Had you always had a interest in the JFK assassination? I mean, how did this come about?
It's the strangest scenario that this happened. I just, I couldn't have imagined this for 100 years. I've never really thought about the JFK assassination, and sure, I know there's a lot of theories, and to me, it was kind of like Bigfoot. Okay, there's a lot of people interested in it, but me not so much. I don't care if there's a big hairy beast living in the woods, and I didn't care if there were 20 people that shot JFK. It just really wasn't on my radar. So I work out of the house, and so I'm sitting here one day, and the phone rings. It's been a couple of years ago. Phone rings, and I pick it up and say hello, and this man says, is this Mitchel Whitington? And I said, well, yeah, it is. He says, well, I understand you're a writer. And I said, yes, actually I am. He goes, great, you can help me write my book. And I was like, oh, no. I mean, I get that phone call, at least once a month, because everybody thinks they have this wonderful story to tell, and, they tell their life story, and to be honest, nobody really does. I mean, if I wrote my life story, it would be like taking Ambien. You'd be asleep halfway through the first chapter, So I thought, this poor guy's like, look, dude, I appreciate what you're saying, and, God bless you, but maybe I can give you some advice and kind of help you on the road, but that's just not what I do. I don't do this. It's like he wouldn't even listen to me. He just kept talking. He said, well, my name is John Currington, and for many years, especially back in the 60s, I was the right-hand man to oil billionaire H.L. Hunt. And I think that Mr. Hunt had something to do with the murders of JFK, Martin Luther King, Bobby Kennedy, and even, a few others, but not the least of which was Jimmy Hoffa. And I'm sitting there in stunned silence, and I finally said, dude, you have my complete attention. So that's how we got
I can imagine.
Yeah. That kind of started the ball rolling. We had some phone conversations, and I checked him out online, and I'm sure he was checking me out online, but he really was who he said he was. He was John Currington. John's in his early 90s now, with probably more energy than all three of us put together. I mean, he's just a fireball.
Wow.
But he is the last man standing from the assassination era, where all those, people got killed, all those, American leaders got killed. And so he had a story to tell, and we started from the very beginning with him saying, look, I don't want to convince anybody of anything, and I don't necessarily have any answers. I've just seen a lot of weird things around these murders and assassinations, and I'd like to get my story out. So that's how the whole thing started.
Well, just so you know, when I do write my autobiography, you guys you won't be able to put the book down. That's my story, and I am sticking to it.
Well, I'll look forward to reading that.
So there's going to be a lot of filler, I take it.
Well, just it wasn't Elvis Presley or Amundsen. It was me. I did all that stuff. So just remember that when, and I was part of Queen. But, we won't go there. I'm not a liar either. Anyway.
I thought your teeth looked familiar.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I kind of want to stick with the JFK assassination, if that's okay, rather than, branch out to Martin Luther King. Okay. And, maybe touch on Bobby. But one of the things that I was curious about is, do you know if there is a New Orleans connection to the assassination conspiracy? And I do have a reason for asking that.
Well, I guess I don't want to come out and say yes right away because, I don't really know for sure, but I can tell you that, the New Orleans Mafia was tied closely with the Dallas Mafia. And so, they were kind of an arm of the New Orleans area, and I guess that the Mafia is a lot like government. They split everything up into different areas, things like that.
Right.
But so anyway, I do know that the Dallas Mafia was pretty closely involved with, especially some of the things with JFK.
Okay.
So,
and we can go into that later if you'd like.
Well, one of the reasons that I was bringing that up is I have a friend of mine who kind of did the same thing as Currington did to you. He had given me a call and wanted to know if I would write a story having to do with the JFK assassination. And I can't really go into it, but he ended up, we haven't pursued it yet. But it turns out that according to this person, his family was mixed up with a New Orleans mob. They lived in the same neighborhood. Some weird things went on. And he was saying that part of the reason that people wanted JFK out of the way had to do with the mess up of the Bay of Pigs when Kennedy just sort of left Cuba hanging, and that messed up the drug trade, the cigar. I mean, literally, kind of messed up a whole business aspect of the mob's trade with Cuba. Do you know anything about that?
Yes, if you look to pre-Castro Cuba, it was a lot like Las Vegas. I mean, the mob had casinos down there. It was a good place to travel. People brought gambling dollars and, of course, left it behind. So it was a very lucrative place for the mob. And then Castro came in and all that got shut down and nationalized. So they were really hoping that, America could do something to take Castro out so they could get back in that trade. And then, like you're saying, there's cigars and drugs and everything else going on that is associated with that kind of stuff. But it fell apart with the Bay of Pigs. And so, yeah, there is a lot of stories that not just the New Orleans mob, but Chicago as well were really upset with Kennedy. So, in John Currington's story, there was the guy that was the head of the Dallas mob was Joe Savello. And he shows up in several of John Currington's stories about, his time with H.L. Hunt. But Savello, from what I understand, reported to New Orleans. So like I said, I guess it's like the government where everybody has another place you report up to. And then, I guess somewhere they've got one overall guy that's in charge.
So I'm curious, because the whole Bay of Pigs thing had already been over by the time Kennedy was assassinated, was the assassination, as far at least in that aspect, was that out of revenge, or did they expect that once Kennedy was out, something would change with Cuba? What was the thinking behind that? Do you have any idea about that?
If the mafia were the one that, actually orchestrated this, which I don't know that for sure. I mean, if you saw that movie, what was it, Murder on the Orient Express, and not to be a spoiler, but, like everybody stabbed the guy, it was a murder by everybody else on board. There were so many people that had a grudge against Kennedy that wanted to see something done with him, like H.L. Hunt didn't like his stance on big oil, and Texas is built on big oil back then, and so Kennedy wanted to levy taxes and take away some of their tax breaks, and so the oil industry just hated him. And by the same token, you had Johnson, who had a incredible grudge against both Kennedys, and we can get into that some if you'd like. And then the mafia for these reasons that we just talked about. But it seemed like everybody was upset with President Kennedy, which makes it kind of hard to figure out, of all the people that might have wanted to pull the trigger, who actually did.
Yeah, because I know as far as the whole gang connection, from what history is kind of showing, the Chicago mob helped get the Kennedys elected. And then when Kennedy appointed Robert as the Attorney General, they started going after the mob, trying to shut them down, which,
that's true.
If we know anything about the mob, they don't like having people stab them in the back like that. So that's why, I've often wondered whether it was strictly the mob. And I had never really heard about H.L. Hunt until, a few days ago. So do you think all of that kind of plays into one big, I don't want to say conspiracy, but...
Well, oddly enough, and I had already sent an email about this to Pete, because Brian, I don't have your email address, so I just sent it to Pete. But
I forwarded it on to Brian.
Oh, did you? Okay. Well, yeah. I'd been going back and making notes. I'm sitting here in front of copious amounts of notes so that I can, recall everything, because I did do the book about 2 years ago. But I went to the grocery store this morning, and I was picking some things up for dinner. And as I'm standing in line, I look over, and here's the National Enquirer. It says, big letters, proof, Hoover ordered JFK murder. And I thought, well, I got to buy that. So I did, and the young lady checking me out, my wife had taught as a student, and so she knows us, and she was like, Mr. Whitt, you're buying this? And I was like, yeah. You see, I wrote a book, and there's this conspiracy, and she's looking at me more like I'm crazy, so I just said, just bring it up. I really wanted to read the Bigfoot story inside. But I thought, well, there's a sign. Man, how clearly did I have to say it? I'm supposed to really be doing this thing tonight because I got a sign. But in that one, I did go ahead and read the article. And oddly enough, they say Hoover was behind it, and he had, enlisted the mob to help, and that Hunt provided a lot of the financing, and the military was involved of getting the real shooters out. And you read it, and based on the things that I have found from, talking to John and writing his story, I was like, this isn't completely out of the woods. I mean, this is not just out in left field somewhere. This could be a possible explanation.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of apropos that we're doing this show as the first one when I get back from taking a trip to Texas, because one of the things that my wife and I both wanted to do is to go to Dealey Plaza. Right. And it was the first time we'd ever done it. And it really is amazing when you're actually there how different everything is than what you see in the old newsreel. Right down to, I never realized that the motorcade was going down a hill. In the newsreel, it looks like it's just a straight, flat area, which is why I thought it was, with both my wife and I being so interested in it. And my wife is actually old enough. She vaguely remembers that day. So she was real excited to get there and take a look. So you had mentioned that H.L. Hunt was upset about Kennedy raising taxes on oil. you're talking about the oil depletion tax allowance that made it so Texas really didn't have to pay any taxes on their oil production. Is that pretty much?
He was wanting to do away with that, so that would cost Hunt millions of dollars, in the long run. So, and Hunt had actually been kind of involved politically. John Currington, the guy that I wrote the story with, and the guy whose story this really is, he and Mr. Hunt went to the Democratic Convention in 1960, and he was there to get LBJ on the ticket. He wanted LBJ to be the president, and they got
Hunt
there.
Did.
Hunt did, yes, because LBJ would be sympathetic to Texas oilmen since LBJ was from Texas. And They got there, and John said it was pretty clear right away that everything was going for John F. Kennedy. He said Joe Kennedy, the dad, was pretty much running the convention. And
Mitchell, can we take a quick pause? We need to go to a station identification break.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
But I don't mean to cut you off, but we'll continue with it as soon as we get back. So we're going to go to a station break, and we'll see you on the other side.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk only on Paranormal Experience Radio. Broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama. Since 1948, Fate Magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting. You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
This is Jason Bland, host of Midwest Paranormal Presents Paranormal Soup, where we stream live as a webcast every Sunday night, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern, with guests who will blow your mind. Live ghost box sessions where you can call into the show to see if the spirits will talk to you, and the World Wide Web of Weird with the latest in paranormal news and evidence. We're bringing the weird every Sunday night, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. Don't forget to follow and subscribe.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 23 minutes after the hour.
Welcome back to the Full Spectrum Project on WBHM-DB out of Atlanta. And if you haven't already joined the chat room, please go to WBHM-DB.com to join the chat room. And if you have any questions for us or our guests, please call area code 205-533-7982. And we have been talking with Mitchel Whitington about the Kennedy assassination. And I apologize for having to cut you off before the break, but you were talking about how LBJ and Hunt wanted LBJ to be president.
Right. And yeah, so at the convention, at the Democratic convention, they saw right away that wasn't going to be possible. It looks like, JFK had it pretty much in the bag thanks to his dad, Joe. So Hunt went after the next best thing, which was to get him as vice president on the ticket. And he did that by selling Joe Kennedy on the fact that his son, was a Catholic guy from the North, and that wasn't going to play in the Deep South, so he needed a good old Southern boy on the ticket, and Joe actually bought it. So that's how that ticket came together. But apparently JFK hated LBJ and vice versa, so it was not really a match made in heaven going into it.
I'm not sure there were a whole lot of people that liked LBJ at the time, though.
Just Hunt. Hunt loved him.
Well, yeah, do you think he loved him, or do you think it was more a matter of how he could use him?
Well, yeah, according to John, H.L. Hunt didn't really have any close friends. He didn't have any drinking buddies or, folks he'd have over to the house, and not even John, who worked with him all those years. He said Hunt was a very strange bird, and he gave me a lot of stories about him that really I put in the book because they just define Hunt. They really do. But, yeah, so I don't think he was a close friend. I just think that he loved the things that he thought LBJ could do for him. He thought that he thought that Johnson, I'm a writer, but I can't talk. He thought that Johnson could do a lot of things for him, and therefore he was really enamored of the fact that he could possibly get into the presidency eventually.
Yeah. Well, he definitely seemed to have found a way, or had a way presented to him.
Right.
So Hunt was a very powerful person within the oil industry and in Texas itself. I had heard, and I'm not really sure how this could have come about, but it was said that he controlled a vast intelligence, God, I can speak, network, and that it included the John Birch Society. I never knew that the John Birch Society was an intelligence network, but how did this come about, and why did the feds even allow him to do this if it was, true?
Well, I don't know that it was an intelligence network, but there was a lot of information being shared around. And Hunt had something else that he used for propaganda a lot, and that was a radio program called Lifeline. And that was broadcast across the nation, and he actually was using that to attack Kennedy. He used it to attack Martin Luther King. Anybody he didn't like, he used his Lifeline program to kind of slander. But he also had some powerful associates, and aside from the vice president, LBJ, another one was J. Edgar Hoover. John told me in the course of, it probably took us a year to write this book, and we were meeting every day for a while, and then we switched to, once a week, and then probably once a month. But in all these meetings and talking to him, John told me these incredible stories, but he said, that H.L. Hunt would tell me, get Hoover on the phone. And he'd said I'd pick up the phone and I'd call Hoover's office, use Mr. Hunt's name, and then when I got him on the phone, I'd give it to Mr. Hunt. And he said, that was a pretty routine thing. And I would be sitting there across the table from him thinking, I'm actually sitting here with a guy that could pick up the phone and get the Vice President of the United States or the Director of the FBI with no problem. And that was kind of a staggering idea to me.
That's real scary, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But so anyway, he had this network of people that were very powerful. So, I don't know if I would call it an intelligence network, but he was definitely putting out propaganda, and he was keeping a lot of tabs on what was going on.
Well, and from what I understand, Hunt had a lot of really, and as you said, he didn't have a lot of friends, but he seemed to have a lot of people around him that were extremely influential. And I believe, I'm sorry, I can't remember the name, but it was one in particular person who had actually been part of trying to get General Douglas MacArthur elected to president, and I guess you could call him a kingmaker. And unfortunately, like I said, I just can't seem to remember the person's name. Do you know who I'm talking about?
No, I'm not familiar with that story. That, and like I said, I'm not really a student of the JFK assassination, other than the scope in which John Currington was involved. And,
Gotcha.
and that's nothing he really ever talked about, so I don't know much about that.
Okay. I had heard that just before, well, maybe not just before, but for a time before Kennedy actually arrived in Dallas, that, and I believe it was Hunt's son, had been distributing leaflets around Dallas, calling JFK a traitor, a communist, a communist mole, and things like that.
Yeah, there was a copy of that also ran in the newspaper the day before, and so yeah, they were putting out propaganda even at that point. Hunt also, another guy that he had kind of in his orbit was Dr. Criswell, the pastor of the First Baptist Church downtown Dallas, the largest Baptist church at the time in Texas. So he actually talked him into preaching a anti-Catholic sermon prior to all that happening. So I mean, he was pulling out a lot of stops to get public opinion against JFK.
Well, did Hunt have any kind of religious background himself?
He attended the First Baptist Church. From what I have learned about him, I think that he probably attended that church because that gave him some influence with Dr. Criswell. And Criswell wielded a pretty big sword in the religious community, especially the Baptist community.
Huh. So with all of that, and with the possible connection of Hoover, LBJ, how did how did they get together? Because it seems like they're intricately connected. So did one person contact another, or did it just sort of grow as this hatred for Kennedy grew?
Yeah, I don't think they had any sit-down meetings where they discussed what they could do. In fact, there's one legend on the internet that says that another oil man, his name was Murchison, I think Clint Murchison, but anyway, he had this big meeting the night before the assassination, and that Hunt was there, and LBJ was there, and just go down the list. It was a who's who of everybody that could have been involved, and that's really gained a lot of traction over the years. So that's one of the things I presented to John. I was like, John, this is being said, and what do you think about that? And he said, no, it never happened. And I said, well, okay, that you know of. And he said, no, it never happened. Well, how could you know that? And he said, well, one of the people that was supposed to be there was Jack Ruby. They put a lot of stock in that and on these rumors. And he said, I knew Jack Ruby. He said, Jack Ruby was a wannabe gangster. He couldn't have found his way over there if he'd been invited. He said, I never went anywhere, or Hunt never went anywhere without me. I would drive him. I went to every meeting he did. Every time he traveled, I was right there with him. He said, if that meeting had occurred, he said, I would have been there. It never happened. So, these rumors of the sit-down meetings things don't just seem to be true. It seems to be people just talking to each other behind the scenes and working things out.
Well, if Hoover wanted Kennedy out of the way, as it were, and Hunt had a direct line, and that's one of the stories that I read, was that Hunt had a direct line to Hoover's office.
Yeah, that's no question. John said he called him many times. Hunt would just say, yeah, get Hoover on the phone for me.
So couldn't the two of them have started this whole assassination conspiracy, as it were?
Yeah, they could have. That's one thing about working with John, is he never tried to speculate. So he never told me who all he thought could have been involved, but he did mention Hoover's name a lot, and I know we're talking about JFK's assassination right now, but if we just just for a nanosecond, kind of jump over to Martin Luther King. When King was assassinated, Hunt was getting in a lot of the public eye, and people were coming down on him thinking he had something to do with it. He had John, he said, get me out of town. So John arranged for he and his wife to go to a Holiday Inn in El Paso. Well, meanwhile, back at the office, a few days later, while they're still kind of hiding out, Hoover calls the Hunt offices, said, I need to talk to, the Hunt offices, and said, excuse me, I need to talk to H.L. Hunt. And I said, well, he's not here. And they said, well, let me talk to John, his guy. So John said he got the phone, and here's Hoover on the phone saying, I got to talk to Hunt. He says, well, I know where he is, so I'll talk to him. He said, well, get him to Washington right now. So he called Hunt in El Paso and told him what Hoover had said. And Hunt said, okay, get me tickets to go to Washington, and I'm going to have the hotel bill where we are sent to our offices, but I want you to pay it with a cashier's check in your name. I don't want anything associated with Hunt Oil traceable to it. So, there was H.L. Hunt and J. Edgar Hoover, directly interfacing. In fact, Hoover calling him to Washington. And John said, I have no idea what that meeting was about. He came back and never mentioned it again. Now, again, that was with a different assassination, but that kind of association between the two seemed to have gone on through, the whole time John worked with him.
So, since we're talking about Martin Luther King, what was it that about Martin Luther King that Hunt wanted him out of the way?
So he was really concerned about Martin Luther King because King had a big voice in the African American community, and he had done, a few things very successfully. Like he led that Montgomery bus boycott in 1955, the one concerning Rosa Parks. Nearly took the bus company out of business. He was involved with the 1963 March on Washington for jobs and freedom. So Hunt was diversified. He didn't just do oil. He also had a Hunt food division, and it wasn't the best quality food, but he sold it cheap. In one of their main, demographics was the African American community, and he was trashing him on his Lifeline program. He was trashing, King, so he was afraid that King might retaliate by organizing a boycott of Hunt Foods, which was is that
the current Hunts that we use, like ketchup and all that stuff?
No.
No, different place. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
But so that was his main concern, was that he could really cost him a lot of money. And he also believed him to be a communist, and he thought the communists were bankrolling him. Hunt was kind of one of these guys in the 60s that, saw a commie behind every bush, so.
How did Hunt have anything to do with James Earl Ray? Did he?
Well, actually, so, King got assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. So, he had an attorney that was working with him, and he ended up firing his attorney. Mm-hmm. So there's a guy named Percy Foreman who was an attorney from Texas, and Percy Foreman flew out and talked James Earl Ray into letting him be his attorney. Well, John says that Hunt in his office had a call on speakerphone, a conference call with him and the attorney, Percy Foreman, and Mr. Hunt. And he said, I was sitting right there, and Mr. Hunt said, I've got a fellow that works for me. He's a young attorney, meaning John, of course. He said, he has some very interesting ideas on who killed King. And the attorney, Percy Foreman, he said, well, I'd be happy to talk to him. So John got on an airplane with a briefcase with $125,000 in it. And in today's money, that's just under $1 million. Yeah. So he carried it. He went into Percy Foreman's office, sat down, and he said, I've got 125,000 reasons why James Earl Ray needs to plead guilty. shooting Martin Luther King. And he said, well, just leave your case right there, and I'll take a look at him. So right after that, James Earl Ray entered a guilty plea, although 3 days later, he came to the judge and said, I need a new attorney and a trial by jury. I was railroaded into this, but the judge denied the request. So Hunt seemed to be financially involved in getting Ray to plead guilty. And, of course, he died in prison, but to his dying day, he said that, he was not guilty. He didn't do it. And the King family doesn't believe he did it. The King family.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. I remember him coming out and having his back on that.
Right. But John carried a lot of money around for Hunt, and he said at the time it was a different world. You didn't have to show your ID. You could just go get on an airplane, and he said nobody searched you or searched your bags. He said that he can't count the number of times he had a briefcase full of money taking it somewhere for Hunt. In this particular case, he said, I had $125,000 in a briefcase.
Wow. So did he allude to the person that did kill King?
No. John is very consistent with saying, I don't know a lot of the details beyond what I saw, but he just wants people to know what he saw. And in this case, you have to think that Hunt was somehow involved for him to put up, in our money, almost $1 million to have an attorney persuade his client to plead guilty.
So I'm curious. You had mentioned that Hunt was I guess you'd say, an avowed anti-communist.
Yes.
Had you heard that he was not related to, but had a political connection with McCarthy, the one who did the
trials? Yeah. No.
Yeah.
I never heard anything about that from John.
No.
It doesn't mean it's not true. He very well could have, but not from the perspective of this book.
Okay. Yeah, because I know when I was doing research on Hunt, that was one of the things that kind of surprised me. And also, I don't know whether John had mentioned it, but there is supposedly a connection with the Bush family. Did he ever mention anything about that?
He never did. But he got out of the business with the Hunt family as the children were starting to come into it, and there was some problems between he and the kids wanted him out because they thought he had their dad's ear too much, and so the whole thing just kind of fell apart, and he left the business. So I don't know, when the Bushes entered into it, how close he was with them.
Right. Well, we have to take another station identification break, but believe me, we're going to continue this when we get back. So we'll see everybody on the other side of the break.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition. bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
And welcome back to the Full Spectrum Project on WBHM Atlanta. If you haven't already joined the chat room, please go to WBHM-DB.com where you can join the chat room and, ask questions of our guest. And if you want to call in to ask questions of us or our guest, you can call in at area code 205-533-7982.
Call it to make fun of Brian like we do.
Actually, Pete, it's a lot more fun to make fun of you. There's a lot more there. By the way, did you know that
is that a fat joke?
No, of course not.
Okay.
No, however, Mitchell, you do know Pete personally, right? So
I met Pete years ago, yeah.
I'm sorry. But, since we were both there at HHL, did you happen to notice that even though I am older than Pete, Pete looks like my grandfather? I thought that was really bizarre.
All right, now, guys, I'm not getting in the middle of that. I'm sorry.
But, you were there. You saw, right?
I saw nothing. I know nothing.
I'll just say that makeup and dye does wonders.
Yes, it does. I will never get old as long as Miss Clairol is alive.
Yep.
It's as simple as that.
Mm-hmm.
During one of the breaks, we were kind of talking about the COVID lockdowns and things like that. And one of the things that I thought was kind of funny is that there are some states that are actually telling people that during the holidays that they have to remain quiet. Have you guys caught wind of that?
Hadn't seen that one yet.
No, not here in Texas.
Yeah, well, definitely not there in
Texas.
Here. But no, seriously, they have been saying that no singing, and if you do, to keep it quiet. They don't want any cheering.
Who's going to police it? Who's going to police it?
I'm not really sure. That was one of the things that I was kind of like, okay, well, how are you going to, enforce this? But here's something that really kind of I was thinking about. So does Hawaii, because they haven't actually said, do they allow loud laughing or just aloha?
Oh, Mitch. In April, we're going to have to hit him for this one.
It was a serious question.
That was the worst one yet, dude. Yeah.
Aloha.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Again, I apologize. He's usually not this bad.
You know the beauty of this? There's nobody for Pete to tell to get the stick.
Yeah, I know. I have to listen to it the rest of the night.
Oh, yes, you do. Wait till I start texting you. I'm just going to start texting you.
Earlier. You did that earlier.
Yeah, but it can get worse. Trust me.
It can get worse. The pictures?
Uh-huh. Oh, no. Those pictures. You know what? We better not go into that on live radio. Yeah.
I'm going to post, dude.
I did get a new tutu, though.
And I'm going to post it.
Well, they have laws against that.
Yeah, I know. I'll make sure that whoever needs to know needs to know.
And by the way, Mitch.
Yes.
You do know that you will never be able to get the thought of me in a tutu out of your head the rest of your life, right?
Well, I was just making myself a note, note to self, block Pete as soon as the call is over. So I can't get
I'm thinking of sandpaper right now to try to see if I can etch it out.
It'll never work, Pete.
No, I know.
Hey, you're lucky I haven't sent you the Speedo pic. There's nothing better than a Californian in a Speedo wearing sandals and black socks.
And your spray on tattoo, spray on sun burn.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, orange is the in thing now. So, okay. On that note, so how did Oswald become involved with this whole conspiracy thing?
Well, one of the things that I did was to do some research on Oswald, and to me, he's kind of a fascinating guy because he dropped out of high school, and then he joined the Marines, and they taught him how to fire a weapon, and that's something that a lot of the people who talk about the assassination hang their hat on as well. He was trained by the Marines. And in fact, I have a guy that went through Marine boot camp that's a good buddy of mine. And he said one of the things the Marines say is when they're starting out your weapons training, they say, we taught Oswald how to shoot. But if you look at it, he qualified only at the middle tier, kind of the satisfactory tier. And then when he requalified, he dropped down a level even. So he wasn't an expert marksman. But more than that, he was court-martialed twice while he was in the Marines, once for shooting himself in the elbow with his own service revolver.
Oh, my Lord.
Yeah, so he got out of that. He got a, not a dishonorable discharge, but I forget the name of it, but it's similar to that. It wasn't an honorable discharge. And so he kind of
maybe a general discharge?
No. It was something like unsatisfactory or something like I forget the exact name of it. But anyway, he bounced from job to job, no career aspirations, nothing like that. But the thing that really interests me is if he was the guy who masterminded this, he put all this stuff together, but he didn't have an escape plan. And that would have been the easiest thing to do back then because he could have easily gotten on an airplane. He could have gotten in the car and just driven to the East Coast, West Coast, whichever, and got lost in the crowd. He didn't do it. He went and he sat down and he watched a double feature movie. It was a double feature war film at the Texas Theater in Oak Cliff, Texas, which is a suburb of Dallas, and that's where they arrested him. So, the mastermind of this plot, if he was the guy, how did he not even have an escape plan? So I have to kind of wonder that this guy that seems to not really have a whole lot on the ball, how he could have pulled a lot of this off.
Yeah. Sorry. It's kind of funny. I got a text from my wife who said she's a better shot than Oswald. And you know what? She actually might be. She's kind of a better shot than I am. She was only, I believe, 6 points away from expert when she was in the Army. So, wow. Yeah, she scares me.
Well, and, as you pointed out, he was shooting not only at a moving target, but a descending target as well.
Right.
Well, yeah, I saw something. I saw a documentary that there was a gentleman that claimed to be the one behind the fence, James Files. Does that name sound familiar?
I've heard of it, yeah.
Did John mention anything about that?
John didn't. He really didn't go into the multiple gunman theory at all because he never witnessed that. He only knew about Oswald and of course Jack Ruby, which he knew Ruby. And actually, John has an interesting story about interacting with the whole Oswald thing right before Oswald was murdered. That we could talk about.
I was just thinking, did you have any weird things happen to you while you were writing this book?
Well, okay, actually, I did have one thing that was kind of strange. It happened the first time John and I met. I've been talking about John a lot, and John is a very interesting guy. He's like, I think now he's 92 or 93, and I called him one time, and I said, John, I've got some questions for you. And he said, well, can you call me back? And I said, well, sure, of course. I didn't mean to bother you. He said, no, I'm cutting hay right now. So he's very energetic. He's just a tremendous guy. But the first time I met him in person, we'd been talking on the phone a lot. We've been talking mostly about the Kennedy assassination because that's where we started the book, even though we touched on all these other fellows. But, it came time to actually meet in person, and we were going to sign a contract of how we were going to structure everything. And so I live in Jefferson, and he lives elsewhere in East Texas, but the town of Longview is kind of in the middle between us. He said, can we meet at this McDonald's down on Highway 80 in Longview? He said, do you know where that is? I said, yeah, it's right by the hospital. Sure, I know exactly. I've been there. So he said, I'll meet you there at 10 in the morning. So I headed out. It's about an hour's drive for me. So about the time I pulled into the Longview city limits, my phone rang, and it was John. He said, I'm already here. He said, and they're redoing the dining room. So he said, it's closed except for the drive-thru. We can't meet there. He said, but right next door to it, there's a Taco Bueno. How about we meet there? And I said, sure, I don't care. So he went in, and, I got there a few minutes later, and I walked in, and I ordered a Diet Coke and went and sat down, met John, and John's kind of a skinny fella, but he's got, he's wearing a cowboy hat and Western attire and pressed shirts and everything. So we sat down, we started talking, and everything was going along, and he had brought a lot of papers to show me and, some of his things that he kept from the hunt era. But meanwhile, the dining room is empty. Nobody else is there because it's the middle of the morning. Well, this guy walks in. He's kind of a clean-cut, mid-20s guy, maybe 30, but he walks in. He's carrying a cell phone and a charger. He walks the length of this dining room, and for a Taco Bueno, it was a pretty big dining room. He walks all the way back to where we were. We were the only ones in the dining room, and we're in the back corner. John always sits with his back to the wall in the furthest corner for some reason, so that's where we were. Well, this guy walks over, and he plugs the phone into a electrical outlet that's about maybe 3 feet away from our table. And I'm thinking, what the heck is going on? He could have plugged into, a dozen other outlets around the room. But he drug a chair over, and he sat down like he's charging his phone. And now he's like almost at our table. And we kept talking, and finally the guy said, hey, you fellas talking about Trump? And then I started thinking, oh, my God, how many times on the phone talking to John have I uttered the words, kill the president? And I thought, oh, my gosh, this guy is like FBI, CIA, NSA. We're in deep trouble. I'm like, no. We're talking about JFK. That was back, in the 60s. Remember? Oh, way back then. No. And so he said, oh, okay. So he sat there, and he was just watching us. And finally, John and I got really uncomfortable. And, we talked about a few more things. And I said, well, let's go. So we said goodbye out in the parking lot. And on the way home, the whole way back, I'm looking in the rearview mirror like, what have I gotten into? What is going to happen to me? Thankfully, that was the one and only weird thing that happened to me during the course of this book, and I have no idea what it was about.
Huh. You probably pulled down an MIB.
There you go. Well,
oh, my Lord.
Either that or I added about a quarter inch to my folder, wherever it is, to FBI.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You're now on a watch list.
Yeah, come to think of it, I haven't tried to fly since then, so...
Yeah,
you'll know when they pull you off into that little room. It's when they ask you to follow them. I
was going to say you might not be able to fly now.
Yeah,
one never knows. That story kind of reminds me. Remember, I told you a friend of mine had approached me with writing a book about the whole Kennedy thing. One of the things he was worried about was the government not wanting secrets to be let out about the Kennedy murders because of the fact that he believes there's a giant government cover-up for the whole thing. And he was not only worried about the government coming after, well, both of us really, because, if I wrote it with him, they might come after both of us. He was also worried about the mob coming after us. So
I could see that.
Although, one of the things I did when I was researching this book, one of the things I did was kind of look into some of the other conspiracy theories to see what people were saying. And there's like 1 million books out there about this. You know, the mob did it, the CIA did it. I even found there was one book, and they claimed that he got killed because he was getting ready to release the truth about the aliens. So even the aliens made it in.
Well, that's pretty good.
I also heard too he was talking about
Pete.
Yeah, go ahead.
Pete, I'm sorry. We're going to have to take the top of the hour break. Unfortunately, Angie is not going to be with us tonight, so we will have a different news segment. But we will definitely be back with Mitchel Whitington when we're finished with the news break.
Welcome back to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 5 minutes after the hour.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Hulu, presenting the new original series No Man's Land. No Man's Land follows the battle between fighting for what you believe in or supporting the ones you love. Stream No Man's Land now, only on Hulu.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. In the coming week, millions of Americans already experiencing isolation fatigue will have to decide whether to spend this Thanksgiving together in person or virtually. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says masks, social distancing, and very small indoor gatherings will help lower the risk of one person infecting another with coronavirus. But as NPR's Ping Wong reports, the CDC is strongly recommending people forget about traveling and stay home.
By staying home, the CDC means celebrating the holiday with people you've been living with for at least 14 days before Thanksgiving. That's the amount of time it generally takes for people to show symptoms from a coronavirus infection. If you must gather with people outside of your household, say college kids coming home or family you're not potting with, the CDC recommends taking extra precautions such as everybody wearing masks, opening doors and windows for ventilation, and limiting the number of people with access to the kitchen and food prep. The CDC urges people to be as safe as possible and to limit their travel. This year, Thanksgiving coincides with a third wave of COVID cases that shows no signs of abating. Ping Huang, NPR News.
More than 2 weeks into a transition being hamstrung by the Trump administration, President-elect Joe Biden is working on uniting the nation's governors behind one crucial goal, bringing an end to a pandemic that has so far killed 250,000 people in the U.S. He and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris held a virtual meeting today with the National Governors Association Executive Committee. Biden promised he'll have their backs once he takes office.
I want to work with you and the Congress on a bipartisan basis to make sure you get the resources you need, from PPE to vaccines.
For the first time in months, the White House plans to hold a coronavirus task force meeting this hour. There are at least 40 Americans currently being held hostage overseas. That's an estimate by the James Foley Legacy Foundation, named for a journalist who was captured and killed by ISIS in Syria. Here's NPR's Mitchel Whitington.
The Foley Foundation says its figures are based on publicly disclosed cases, so the number of hostages and wrongfully detained Americans could be higher. There are known cases in 11 countries, and the Foley Foundation highlights some of them, from a contractor who was abducted in Afghanistan this year to a freelance journalist who disappeared in Syria in 2012. There's also the Iranian-American father and son, Bakr and Siamak Namazi, and cases in Egypt, Saudi Arabia, China, Russia, and Venezuela. A State Department official with knowledge of hostage affairs says the report generally tracks with U.S. government records. Michelle Kellerman, NPR News, Washington.
U.S. markets were mixed before the close. You're listening to NPR News. Heading into Thanksgiving week, yet more Americans have just filed for unemployment for the first time. According to the Labor Department, initial claims for jobless insurance went up last week by 31,000 to a seasonally adjusted 742,000. That was widely unexpected. During the course of the pandemic, millions of Americans have been out of work in large part because safety restrictions force businesses to scale back staff or shut down altogether. For many, unemployment runs out next month. Without a new congressional relief package in sight, they're facing the prospect of not making rent or not being able to put enough food on the table. The National Science Foundation says it'll decommission a giant radio telescope in Puerto Rico over safety concerns. NPR's Jeff Brumfield reports its size made it a cultural icon.
The 1,000-foot dish at the Arecibo Observatory sits in a natural sinkhole ringed by jungle. Its many big-screen appearances include the Bond film Goldeneye.
For England, James? No, for me.
The telescope also made numerous contributions to science, including tracking asteroids and the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. But it was aging. In August, a support cable snapped, followed by a second cable this month. The NSF's Ralph Gaum says it's become a safety problem.
The telescope is currently at serious risk of an unexpected, uncontrolled collapse.
The NSF says work at the Arecibo Observatory will continue even after the big dish is gone. Jeff Brumfield, NPR News.
U.S. stocks were higher. This is NPR.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Amazon, relied on by companies to help keep their employees and customers safe. Discover bulk safety supplies such as face masks, shields, gloves, sanitizers, and more at amazon.com/care.
Welcome back to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 5 minutes after the hour.
And welcome back to the Full Spectrum Project on WBHM-DB out of Atlanta. If you haven't joined the chat room already, please go to WBHM-DB.com and join the chat room where you can type out some questions for our guest or for us. And if you would like to call in with questions, you can call in to area code 205-533-7982. Now, we have been talking to Mitchel Whitington about the Kennedy assassination, and we had just kind of gotten into Lee Harvey Oswald and his involvement with him. Now, I was curious, and you may not know about this if John hadn't touched base with it, but I had heard that Oswald had tried to shoot a General Edwin Walker, who was actually friends with Hunt. And I'm wondering whether that might have brought Oswald to Hunt's attention that could have gotten Oswald involved with the whole assassination conspiracy.
Yeah, and I guess that's possible. John did mention that, and I ended up putting a few paragraphs in the book, and which I hadn't even said the name of the book. It's H.L. Hunt, Motive and Opportunity. I'll get that self-plug in there, but anyway.
Oh no, please keep plugging.
So I did a little, a few paragraphs on that, did some research on it, and I couldn't tell that anything came of it, but that was on John's radar. He did talk about that. Now, I don't know what Hunt, saw in that or came away from that with, if anything. But I do know that, John did mention it, so that probably means Hunt was aware of it.
One of the pieces of research that I was looking through, it had a reference to Oswald having secret meetings with H.L. Hunt. Do you know anything about these meetings? Were they before, after, during the planning stage? And do we have any knowledge of what was said at these meetings?
I saw those things too, and the way I did the book was I was, writing John's information down and putting it into a book form, but I was doing research on the internet just to see what other people were saying and had said, and I ran across that. When I asked him if that was a possibility, he said to his knowledge, Oswald never met with Hunt. He said if he had come to the offices, he said, I would have known. He said my office was adjacent to H.L. Hunt's, and there was a door between it, and it was never closed. He said, I saw everybody that came and went. He said, but Lee Harvey Oswald, to his knowledge, never met with Hunt. Now, having said that, there is an interesting story he told me about Marina Oswald.
Okay.
That's his, that's Lee Harvey Oswald's wife.
Right.
So a few weeks after the assassination, John said he got a phone call on Saturday morning from Mr. Hunt, who said, I need you to go into work. And he said that wasn't unusual. They worked a lot of Saturdays. He said, that was no problem. He said, but Hunt went on to say, I need you to go. And they had 2 floors in a bank building. He said, I need you to go clear out all of our people on both floors. He said, go office to office. If anybody's come in to do work on the weekends, send them home. He said, and once you've done that and the 2 floors are empty, go downstairs, wait in the lobby. If anybody comes in, send them home. And he said, I need you to do that right now. So he said he did, and he went and he was sending their people home, and he said, I went down to the lobby, and I'm standing there. A couple of our guys came in, sent them back out. He said, and then Mr. Hunt came in. He said, didn't speak to me, didn't say anything, walked straight to the elevator. Took it up, and he couldn't see the elevator from where he was. He said, but he assumed he went to the offices. He said, a little bit later, a black car pulls up, and out gets Marina Oswald, Lee Harvey Oswald's wife, to meet with H.L. Hunt, apparently, because she walked in, she didn't say anything, and she punched the elevator. She went up. He said that he had no idea why Mr. Hunt would be meeting with her, but he kind of positioned himself to look at the black car. It was a black sedan. He said it had U.S. government plates. He said about 20 minutes went by. Elevator dinged. She comes out. She gets in the car, drives away. A few minutes later, Hunt comes down. He leaves without saying anything to John. And I said, John, are you sure it was her? And he said, oh, she was in every magazine, newspaper. He said, there was no way not to recognize her. He said, there's no question that it was her. And I said, well, what could he have been doing? And he said, I really have no idea. He never mentioned it, didn't share it with me. So even though John is pretty adamant about the fact he never met with Lee Harvey Oswald, he does believe that he met with Marina, his wife. So to what reason? That's a good question.
How did Jack Ruby get contracted or asked or whatever to assassinate Oswald?
Okay, so John does have a pretty interesting story about that. He said he knew Ruby. Ruby ran some gentlemen's clubs, and he said when they had visitors from out of town to hunt oil, they would entertain them. He said I would often take them to Ruby's club and say, you can pick out any one of these ladies that you'd like to spend more time with. And he said that he looked at Ruby more as a pimp than anything else. He certainly wasn't a mafia guy. He wasn't, even though he was a wannabe, John kept saying. But anyway, so John, after the Kennedy assassination, that Saturday morning, that happened on Friday. Saturday morning, John gets a call from Mr. Hunt, and he said, "I need you to go down and go to the police station, find out what kind of security they have around Lee Harvey Oswald. I need to know kind of, what the level of security is, what they're doing." And John said, okay, and he was trying to figure something out. Now, John is an attorney, even though he didn't have a practice. He worked only for Mr. Hunt. But he got a call right after that from his housekeeper. And she'd worked for him for years, and she said, "Oh, Mr. Currington, I've got problems. My husband just got arrested for a DWI. Can you get him out?" And John said, it just lit up. "Yes, I can." Now that gave him a reason to go down to the police station. So he went down there, and he said to bond somebody out for DWI, you have to go back and forth between the courthouse and the police station. First, you have to go register as the attorney of record. Then you have to go arrange for bail. Then, he said, so I was in and out of the police station several times. He said there were no extra security measures. He said nobody stopped me. Nobody asked me what I was doing there. Nobody looked in my briefcase, nothing. And he said, and I think it was the second time he went to the police station, he hit the elevator and the door opened, and there was a police officer there that he personally knew standing there guarding Oswald. He was taking him somewhere, and he said the officer looked at him and said, "John, how'd you like to meet the SOB that killed the president?" So he said, when I finished my task, I went back home and I called Mr. Hunt and I said, there is no security around him. They are just taking him around, without any problem at all. And Hunt said, "Okay, I'd like you to contact Joe Civillo, have him come over tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. Well, John said by this time it's, late night, like 11 o'clock, midnight, and he's just been asked to go to the home of the head of the Dallas Mafia. And if you remember us talking about Civillo earlier in the conversation, he was the Dallas Mafia chief. And so John went to his house, knocked on the door, woke him up, and he said, "I'm here from Mr. Hunt. He would like you to be at his house at 6 o'clock in the morning." And Joe Civillo didn't get mad when he found out it was from Mr. Hunt. He said, "Okay, I'll be there." Well, John goes home, goes to bed, gets up with his family, goes to the First Baptist Church in downtown Dallas. And he said Dr. Criswell was preaching his sermon. In the middle of the sermon, this man walks out on stage and hands Criswell a note. And he said he stopped, he opened it, and looked up and said, "I think I should tell everybody that Lee Harvey Oswald has just been killed." So that's his story.
That sounds like 1 + 2.
Yeah. And of course, and he didn't know anything further about it, but I've always thought personally it was interesting that he was going to die of cancer in the not too distant future.
Yeah.
So, did he already have the disease? And, he knew he was gone and they promised to take care of his family. I don't know. That's all speculation. John knew nothing about that, but I've always thought that was an interesting piece to that puzzle.
Now, I'm kind of curious because I had read somewhere that Ruby had actually gone to see Hunt the day before he went to shoot Oswald. Do you know anything about that?
When I questioned John, he said that Ruby would not have been let into the building. He said that he was really just a low-level guy. He owned some strip clubs, and he liked to consider himself a gangster. He said, but Mr. Hunt would not have given him the time of day. He said none of that was true. And I read those same things, which is why I quizzed John about it. And he said, in no way. And he said, by the same token, that party that allegedly happened the night before where they, Ruby was there and LBJ was, he said, he couldn't have found his way to that party. He said he was just not a bright guy. So John didn't think there was any interaction between Hunt and, Lee Harvey Oswald. But, there is another piece of that puzzle with Joe Civillo. John told me that Joe Civillo, as the head of the Dallas Mafia, that, this is before DFW Airport was there. There was only one airport, and that was Love Field in downtown Dallas. And he said at the entrance to Love Field was a liquor store, and that Joe Civillo owned that. Now, he's the head of the mafia. He doesn't need to own a liquor store, but they used it to launder
at the
money.
front. Yeah.
Right. So it was a money laundering thing, but he had an office there. And he said several times in the course of his employment with Hunt, they would go call on Mr. Civillo just to visit. You know, Hunt wanted to kind of keep in touch with everybody he thought could be important to him. And he said at one of those meetings that Hunt asked Civillo, he said, I've got a hypothetical question for you. He said, if you wanted to kill somebody, how would you do it, making sure that you wouldn't get caught? And Civillo said, well, one of two ways. He said, number one, kill the killer, you know, after the deed's done, or number two, have the killer plead guilty, which would stop the investigation. And if you look back, even though Oswald may or may not have been the killer, they killed the guy that everybody thought had pulled the trigger.
Right.
You know, and then if you look at, you know, a little bit further down there to, you know, to Mr. King, when he was killed, they had him plead guilty to it. They had, you know, his assassin plead guilty to it. So those two things are exactly what Civillo told Hunt.
Yeah, they kind of fell right into place. All right, we have to take another station identification break, but when we come back, we will continue with Mitchel Whitington. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, my mouth's kind of dry. I need to get some water, but we'll continue with our discussion as soon as we get back.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Paratalk Radio is your one-stop for all things paranormal, the unknown, and the supernatural. Join us every Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central for discussions and guests on topics such as ghosts, hauntings, Bigfoot, UFOs, and more. This broadcast is rated M for mature and intended for listeners over 16 on paratalkradio.com.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
The time is 23 minutes after the hour.
Welcome back to the Full Spectrum Project on WBHM-DB out of Atlanta. please join the chat room. You can get to it by going to WBHM-DB.com. And if you want to call in with questions for us or our guest, you can dial area code 205-533-7982. And Mitchell, when we left for the break, you had said something about a party that I guess people are saying that Ruby had attended, although you said that there is no way that he would have ever been able to get into the party. And I just kind of wanted to touch on that because I had heard that according to Madeline Brown, who was supposedly having an affair with LBJ.
Yeah, LBJ's girlfriend, yeah.
Right. That the night before the assassination, while at this party, LBJ had told her, and this is a quote, "After tomorrow, those goddamn Kennedys will never embarrass me again. That's no threat. That's a promise." Did that actually happen, or is there any validity to that?
John says none at all. He said, number one, that Murchison and Hunt weren't close friends, and they were kind of rivals in the oil business. So he said that he doesn't believe that Hunt would have ever gone over there. And he said, had he gone, he said, I would have gone with him. He said, I went with him everywhere, every business meeting. He said, so there's just no way that happened. And then he said the thing that was the real kind of nail in the coffin for the story for him was that Jack Ruby was there. He said Ruby was, such a low-tier kind of guy that he would never have been invited to a party like that. So he dismissed it immediately, even though I did read that interesting quote that, she has said many times in the media.
Well, I know when I read that little piece, I didn't read anything about Ruby being there or Hunt being there. So I'm wondering, did the party even take place?
Well, in one of the sources I found online, and of course you find everything online, but they had a list of people that were supposedly in attendance, and it was Murchison and LBJ, and it was a who's who of people whose names have been associated with this. So as far as John is concerned, the party never took place. And I think that, Hunt seems to have moved so much money around that I think he would have had to have been at such an important gathering. But again, that's me speculating. John just flat out says, no, that didn't happen. Although,
gotcha.
I do have an interesting quote for you. This one did happen. Hunt was he was getting ready for the World's Fair. They were going to have a booth in the World's Fair for him to promote his Lifeline program. And this was 1964 World's Fair. And so Hunt even took over the Midway, and he was spending, $1 million on all these rides, and he had bought a house up there for them to use as a quarters, and bought a car. And John said they were traveling back and forth to New York, spending a lot of money, but Hunt saw this as a great opportunity to get the word out about his Lifeline program that he used for propaganda. And he had been using it so much about Kennedy. And the guy that was in charge of the fair called him in one day, and he said, Hunt, I don't like you. The president doesn't like you. You're out of this. Get out of my fair. And Hunt had just been thrown out of the World's Fair and lost a lot of money that he had already put in. And so John says they went back to their house that they were using as their HQ, and they're sitting there, and Mr. Hunt said, get LBJ on the phone for me. So John said he did. He picked up the phone. He got Johnson on, and he heard the conversation. And, Mr. Hunt said, look, I've just had a problem. You're not going to believe what's just happened to me. And LBJ said, no, I already know all about it, and there's nothing I can do. I can't help you out. This came from higher up. Well, the only person higher up than the vice president.
Vice president, yeah.
Yeah. So, Hunt realized that this was JFK's way of getting back at him for him attacking him so much propaganda-wise. So John said they were headed back to Dallas, and Hunt was being really quiet, which meant he was really mad. And he said, Mr. Hunt finally looked over at me, and he said, I've about had a belly full of these Kennedy boys. They've got to go. Well, a few months later, JFK would be dead. A few years later, and Bobby would be dead.
Wow.
Yeah, that definitely goes right back to motive for Hunt.
Yep.
So now you have, excuse me, now you have the taxes that he was going to institute in Texas. You have him kind of usurping LBJ from being president, and now you have him being kicked out of the World's Fair. So,
well, I heard one of the things I heard that that affected might have affected Kennedy's assassination was that he wanted to do away with the Treasury and bring back the gold standard. Is that true?
I'd never heard anything about that, but it doesn't surprise me. Like I said earlier, when I was looking at the different conspiracy theories, it was everybody's got one, and it involves everybody except Bigfoot. That's the one I didn't see. So I hope you guys will have me back on next year when my new book comes out, Bigfoot Killed Kennedy. But
now, see,
of course,
I have always thought that Bigfoot was actually the mastermind of the whole thing.
There you go.
And now you've just sort of, given me validation on that. So I appreciate that. And I will be the first one to buy that book.
No, of course I'm kidding. But
that would explain that blur that you see back there behind Oswald.
Yeah.
It's Bigfoot giving the orders. Yep, exactly.
Well,
so.
You were talking about Hunt's motive, but there was another thing that to me was really impressive that gave LBJ motive. And once LBJ became vice president, he was wheeling and dealing in Washington, and he got associated with a guy named Bobby Baker. And he had a lot of things going on. He was one of the guys that founded this thing called the Quorum Club, and it was a private club adjacent to the Senate office building. And they say it's a place where the congressman could go and have drinks and meet ladies, and so it was kind of a speakeasy for the congressman. And this guy was getting into more and more shady businesses. So Bobby Kennedy, as Attorney General, started investigating him, found out that LBJ was an associate, that LBJ had been, getting into some of these businesses with him. Bobby also saw that, that LBJ had somehow gotten a $7 billion contract for this fighter plane to be built by General Dynamics in Fort Worth, Texas, so in his home state, right? So he launched a Senate investigation against both this Bobby Baker fella and LBJ, and he was trying to bury them both. And Baker had to resign from his positions that he held, and that was a month before JFK was assassinated when he did that. So LBJ was, he's still under investigation when Kennedy got killed. Mm-hmm. And, of course, as president, all that went away.
Right.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you if there was any other motive behind LBJ wanting Kennedy dead other than just to assume the presidency. And you just sort of answered that quite nicely.
Yeah, John believes in his heart that, he's told me several times that he believes that Bobby was going to get rid of LBJ, and then that Bobby and JFK would do the next ticket together with Bobby as the vice president.
Well, what are your thoughts on why LBJ didn't run for a second term?
Well, interestingly enough, that apparently came from Mr. Hunt. Hunt saw that. This is all according to John, and I put this in the book because I thought it was kind of interesting. He said that Hunt saw that the political climate was changing up there, and that LBJ was not going to be as effective, and probably couldn't win against Bobby. So before Bobby was even killed, he had advised Johnson not to run for another term.
Wow.
Yeah, and he said that Hunt literally called him on the phone and said, "I don't think you ought to do this. I think you need to bow out right now."
And he listened to him.
Well, the richest man in the world can command a lot of attention. So.
Yeah, he can.
Yeah, apparently.
Do you know if Hunt had anything on him that for him to just bow out like that?
I don't. I never heard anything from John about that, so I not to my knowledge, and I don't think he had anything on any of the people that we've been talking about. Although, as a side note, and this didn't come from John, this came from some of my research, that there was some talk about Hoover, that he was a cross-dresser, and in those days that was considered something really terrible, and that a photo had surfaced of him in a dress, and that the mafia had it, and that one of the reasons that he was so protective of the mafia was he did not want that coming out.
Do you think that might have had anything to do with why Hoover wanted the Kennedys out so badly? Because it seemed like he just did not want the Kennedys in those positions.
He didn't. John reiterated time and time again that he said the Kennedys hated Hoover, they hated LBJ, and that it was reciprocal. LBJ hated them, and that Hoover hated them as well. So, then I have to get back to being in the supermarket line and picking up the Enquirer that said Hoover ordered JFK murder.
Right.
So who knows? I mean, it's certainly as plausible a theory as some of the ones I've seen.
Sometimes the Enquirer does get it right.
Once in a blue moon. I had read that there was a connection between LBJ and a CIA operative by the name of Cord Myers. Was Hunt involved with this Myers or the CIA that you know of?
Not to my knowledge, no. Strictly the FBI is all that I was ever told.
Okay. Now, getting back to just after the assassination, supposedly, and I have a feeling that this one's another one of those conspiracy theories, that Hunt was actually arrested in Dealey Plaza shortly after the assassination and was actually one of the 3 tramps or hobos that they had pulled into question. Is there any validity to that whatsoever?
None whatsoever. In fact, they watched the motorcade go by. John said that he was in his office, which was adjacent to H.L. Hunt's, and he went over and told him, he said, "Hey, I think the motorcade's about to come by." He said, so they stood at the window, and they watched it go by, and then they both went back to work, and then John got a call from one of his associates just a few minutes later and said, "Hey, the president's been shot." So he went into Hunt's office and said, "Hey, I just heard that the president's been shot." And he said Hunt was very, non-reactive about it, just, like, "Oh, okay," and went right back to work.
Yeah, almost as if he expected it and wasn't surprised.
Right. Yeah, he said he was in no way surprised, alarmed, even inquisitive.
There's also another story that, again, it's one of those that I kind of took with a grain of salt, was a person by the name of Jim Braden, who was supposedly part of the mafia, who had visited Hunt the day before the assassination and then was arrested after the assassination, taking an elevator to the ground floor of the Dell Techs building. Is there any truth to that? Do you know anything about it?
That didn't fit into John's world at all. I never heard anything about that from him. So while I can't say that's not true, certainly that's nothing that seemed to be on his radar.
Yeah, and you would think that if a high-level mafia had met with Hunt, the day before the assassination, that John would have known about it. So it's probably just another one of those that, it was just thrown out there.
Yeah, he was at all the meetings with Joe Civello throughout the years where they just went to visit. He said, "I was at all those. I was there when he talked about how do I kill somebody." And, he was at every one of those meetings. I would feel like he would be at, another one if another mafia representative was there. And I don't know why he would meet with somebody other than the head of the mafia in the city they lived. Joe Civello was the top gun right there, so I don't think he would meet with anybody else.
Well, the only thing I could think of on why he might meet with a mafia person, because I believe this Jim Braden was a mafia hitman. So I was thinking, okay, well, if this did happen, maybe it had something to do with him being one of the shooters. Because and I don't know what you think, but Oswald not being such a great shot, even though I get a kick out of it. He's even mentioned in the movie Full Metal Jacket.
Yes, right.
Yeah, during the rifle practice. But from what I heard, like you said, he wasn't a very good shot. So, I don't know how many shooters there might have been. If memory serves, they're basically saying there was somebody from the grassy knoll and then another one that might have been up on the train overpass. Am I getting that right?
And behind the fence.
Yeah.
Do we have time for me to tell a quick story about that?
Sure. Absolutely.
Okay, so the guy that, and we were just extremely fortunate. We got a introduction to the book by a guy named Cyril Wecht. And
I know Cyril. I don't know him personally. Yeah.
Yeah. He's probably the foremost forensic pathologist in America today, And so he wrote our introduction, and one of the things that he said was that Kennedy got shot. They brought him to Parkland Hospital in Dallas, and they pronounced him dead. And he said at that time everything went over to the Dallas, coroner. It was his job to. There'd been a murder in Dallas, so it was his job to take possession of the body, to start the investigation, to coordinate with police, and all like this. So he happened to have offices in Parkland, so he goes down there to start his job, and he said, I'm here for the body, and the Secret Service throw him up against the wall, guns drawn, tell him to leave, which he does. They illegally load the president's body on the Air Force One, swear Johnson in on Air Force One, and they take off for Washington. Well, the people that they chose to do the autopsy, and this is arguably the most important autopsy that had been performed in our country up to that point, and they chose 3 military guys to do it. And according to Dr. Wecht, there were 3 military officers. 2 of them weren't even forensic pathologists, and one was a pathologist, but he'd never served as a coroner, so he never had the day-in, day-out job of doing autopsies. None of them had ever done a gunshot autopsy. So Dr. Wick, to quote him, he says, here it is. Of the 3 men assigned that were in the room, not one of them had the education, training, or experience to do the task. So, here they could have found how many different bullets, how many different angles. They could have determined all the things you were just talking about, but they turned it over to people that couldn't do that job, that's pretty interesting.
Well, was it true too that they had changed the wounds to make it look like a different pattern?
Don't know anything about that. Dr. Wicht, he did get to review the autopsy notes, but of course he wasn't there for the actual autopsy.
Okay.
Now for Bobby Kennedy, he said it was just the opposite. When they did that, it was a who's who of in the state of California of forensic pathologists. He said that it was done very well, probably one of the better ones that he's ever reviewed. But Kennedy's, JFK's, he said it was just a travesty. And of course, there's no way to prove anything. And that's what you would want if there was a conspiracy.
Right.
Do you happen to know if Noguchi is the one who did the autopsy on Robert Kennedy?
I don't recall the names. I just recall, what Wicht wrote in the book. That it was very well done, and everybody in the room agreed. Well, and of course, the interesting thing about that was everybody in the room agreed that the killing shot came from 1 inch behind the base of his skull, which there's no way that Saran could have done that.
Yeah, I was just going to say he didn't have that access.
I was going to say if everybody agrees that it was done well, then it probably wasn't Thomas Noguchi. He was We'll just leave it at that. Anyway, we have to take another quick break. When we come back, we will continue with Mitchel Whitington talking about the Hunt conspiracy to kill John F. Kennedy. And we will see you on the other side.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting,
the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
This is Jason Bland, host of Midwest Paranormal Presents Paranormal Soup, where we stream live as a webcast every Sunday night, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern, with guests who will blow your mind. Live ghost box sessions where you can call into the show to see if the spirits will talk to you, and the World Wide Web of Weird with the latest in paranormal news and evidence. We're bringing the weird every Sunday night, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. Don't forget to follow and subscribe.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio. Broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 45 minutes after the hour.
Welcome back to the Full Spectrum Project on WBHM-DB out of Atlanta. If you haven't joined the chat room, please do at WBHM-DB.com. And if you want to call in with questions for us or our guest, you can dial area code 205-533-7982. Mitchell, when I saw you at HHL, did I happen to mention that I just retired, took an early retirement from my day job?
No.
Yeah, it's great.
That's great.
Yeah, it was actually the Friday. Well, my first day on retirement was Halloween, which I thought was cool considering I write ghost books.
Sure,
but,
appropriate,
yeah. Yeah, it's really kind of weird though, because now that I'm not working, and I don't understand it. I've been getting kind of depressed by it, which I will never understand.
Here we go, Mitch.
Stop it.
It's
Pete.
coming.
You know, every time I try and talk, you have to go there. I mean, I'm just trying to, put a little bit of me out there. Anyway, I have a friend that keeps telling me to cheer up, that it could be worse, that I could be underground in a hole full of water, drowning. The thing is, I mean, I appreciate it. I know he means well.
Oh.
3, 2, 1.
Oh. It was there. I had to use it.
This is going to sound weird, but I love doing you guys' show.
What scares me is you planned that, and I had to be quiet.
Well, So anyway, getting back to this. So did John mention anything about Sam Giancana being involved with the assassination attempt with Kennedy?
He was aware of him. He had never met him, at least to my knowledge, that he ever talked about. But I know that he knew who he was, and in fact, they one of the, I guess, meetings that John had with Joe Savello was he got a call from Hunt at home, and he said, "Hey, I need you to, before you come into the office, I need you to go find something out for me. I'm going to want to open a bank account in Chicago. Go by and talk to Joe Savello and find out what a good bank would be. What's a good bank that some of his friends would use." And John felt like, by friends, he meant the mafia. So anyway, he did. He went by and talked to Joe Savello, and Joe gave him the name of a bank. I think it was a Continental Illinois National Bank, and he said he went back. He told Mr. Hunt, and Hunt immediately opened a checking account at that bank, and the initial deposit was $250,000, which that's $250,000 but today in our world that would be like over $2 million he put in that account. John said he never heard anything about the account afterwards. He said, I don't know what happened. He said, but Chicago obviously was the home of, Sam, so he wondered if there was some relationship there.
One of the reasons that I thought it was kind of interesting that Sam Giancana popped up in relation to Kennedy's assassination was the fact that Giancana has a really close tie with the Kennedy family. Right. There's a story that Kennedy, after the whole Bay of Pigs debacle, had hired Giancana to go down to Cuba and assassinate Castro using a suppository, a poisonous suppository that the CIA had developed. But supposedly Giancana couldn't actually get into Cuba due to the complete lockdown from Castro.
Right. And
then later on, and actually Giancana's son and wife say that same suppository was used to kill Marilyn Monroe on the orders of Robert Kennedy. So,
and I have always heard that Marilyn was much more involved with Robert than she was with John.
Yeah. Well, yeah. She actually never had an affair with John Kennedy. Her involvement with John was trying to get the president to tell Robert to leave her alone. And this is coming from papers that were from Marilyn's psychologist.
Yeah.
So whether that's true or not, who knows?
I tell you what, there's a couple of interesting sources. There's a movie called The Rat Pack. Mm-hmm. And, of course, it's about Sinatra and Dean Martin and Sammy Davis. It's about them. But the thing going on in the periphery is Sinatra's relationship with, JFK and how Sam Giancana got involved. And I have read several places that people who have seen that movie in the know, who have actually studied the history, say that's actually really accurate. So if you want a good picture of that, rent that movie. And there's also a book called The Judith Exner Story. And Judith Exner was supposedly the mistress of JFK and Sam Giancana.
Oh, wow.
So she was having a relationship with both of them, and I've read the book.
I'm sure that didn't go well.
Yeah.
Well, and that was one of the problems was people were coming to Kennedy saying, hey, you've got this girl on the side, but she also is sleeping with one of the head mafia guys. But do check that movie out, The Rat Pack. It's really interesting about that relationship between JFK and Giancana, and then also Sinatra. So it's really worth watching.
Yeah, I'll definitely check it out.
Yeah, I will too. Okay,
so,
I have to ask you this. I'm dying to ask you this, Mitch.
Okay.
Now okay.
Run, Mitch, run.
No, where's Hoffa?
Where is Jimmy Hoffa?
Where is Hoffa?
There's one of those left field questions that we love about Pete so much.
Well, actually, there's all kind of things. He was buried at the Meadowlands, and he's here or he's there. Kind of the current wisdom, I think, is there was a book that came out called I Heard You Paint Houses. Mm-hmm. And I can't remember the name of the author, and maybe it'll come to me in a second. But, yeah, I Heard You Paint Houses, which is a mafia term because he would, shoot somebody, and the paint was, of course, the blood, spraying out. But they say that a guy they called him in the mafia the Irishman, and he was the guy that actually killed Hoffa. And what was it? Okay. It's Frank the Irishman Sheeran, and the book was written by Charles Brett. I thought I had a note about that in case this came up. But yeah, I heard you paint houses, and it's been disputed by a few people. For the most part, that's being accepted. That that's pretty much what happened to him. That they put him in the car, and it was it's kind of like Abe Vigoda in The Godfather. He got caught. They take his gun. They put him in the car with 4 people, and he knows he's being driven off to be killed. And so, in 1975, Hoffa went to the Marcus Red Fox restaurant in Detroit, like in the middle of the afternoon, and the last time anybody saw him, he was getting in a car with some other guys. And so that makes perfect sense. But yeah, I have not had a chance to read that book. I hear you paint houses, but a lot of people I've talked to seem to think that that's pretty much right on as to what happened to him.
Okay. I'm thinking that he's wearing cement galoshes.
Well, either that or did you watch Sopranos?
I never did.
Oh, the 30 seconds of darkness or 60 seconds of darkness at the end?
This was they killed somebody and then they took him to a butcher shop and they start cutting him up. And
yeah.
Yeah, and one of the guys...
Barbecue!
Yeah, it reminded me not to eat here for a few weeks.
Yeah, exactly. All right, we only have a few minutes left, but I really wanted to ask you about this. Hunt's son, Howard, if I'm getting this correctly, had an involvement in the Watergate scandal, and when he was testifying, and I don't know whether he was talking about the JFK assassination to try and get a reduced sentence, but he, I guess, had written a note, and there's a line in one of the notes that all he wrote was French gunman grassy knoll. Do you know anything about that?
I don't. That's interesting, though. That's kind of worth looking into. And, Hunt had a lot of children. He had 3 families, right?
No, I didn't.
He had 3 wives, 3 different families, and 3 different locations, all at about the same time.
Wow.
And yeah, and after his death, of course, you can imagine the fighting that went on over the money. But yeah, there was 3 different families, and one of his daughters wrote a book and said the reason that my dad did that was he thought that his genes were so important to the human race that he wanted to leave behind as many children as possible to bless the human race with, his genes.
Oh, beautiful.
And that is true. You can read all about that. But one of John's jobs was to kind of juggle all 3 families, make sure the money got here and there. And, and Hunt would travel around and spend time with each of the 3. And each thought, wow, my husband travels a whole lot. So, yeah, he did have a lot of family.
Yeah, that's kind of an understatement if he had 3 going at once.
Yeah, I got to tell you guys, I love my wife. We've been married 41 years. She's just, she's a part of me, and she is my soulmate, but man, would I not want 2 more.
Yeah, my wife is probably listening right now, but I couldn't handle more than just her anyway. So, yeah, not in the cards. No.
Right. He had 3, yeah.
I love you, honey. I figured I better say that.
Good call.
So let me know how it is outside in the car tonight.
Well, actually, the car's comfortable. I've been sleeping in it a lot lately, but nobody ever said I was intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, also in the during the Watergate hearing, apparently Howard Hunt also said that LBJ was ultimately responsible for JFK's assassination. So it seems to me that if you have Hunt's son saying that, it really makes me wonder whether LBJ wasn't the mastermind behind all of this, as a way to stop the investigation, as you said he was still under investigation, and to assume the presidency. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, certainly that would be the quick and easy way to end the investigation, make sure it went no further. And he had a good money source with Hunt, and Hunt had no love for JFK, as we've been talking about. And then if you had, the head of the FBI to help kind of, pull everything together, it could easily be seen how that could be done. And I would not rule that out at all as a possibility.
Yeah, because I mean, to me, it just seems like there is just too much that was involved with the assassination. I was at Dealey Plaza recently, and it was the first time I was there, and I actually walked around to the top of the grassy knoll, and the angle that I was looking at would be perfect for a shot to Kennedy's head that could have caused the back of his skull to blow out like it did. I've never agreed with the fact that, he got hit in the back of the head and everything flew out backwards. Ballistics don't work that way.
Right.
And I don't know. It just seems like with everything that went on, there had to have been a very powerful individual that had planned all of it and had probably brought Hunt in knowing his dislike for the Kennedys. And it just seems to me that LBJ, and this was after, doing the research the last few days on this, that it seems more clear to me that LBJ was probably the mastermind behind this. And unfortunately,
one of the things James okay, go ahead.
I was going to say, unfortunately, we have to leave it there because we are out of time.
Okay.
But Mitchell, thank you so much. This was absolutely fascinating.
Guys, I appreciate it. Like I said, I love being on your program. So anytime I can work my way in, let me know. I'll be happy to kind of shoehorn my way in there.
Oh, absolutely. We love having you on. So as next week is Thanksgiving, there won't be a live show, but please join us December 3rd when we welcome John Kachuba for a discussion about shapeshifters. We'll deal with lycanthropes and dieting. So please join us then. Nobody's saying anything about that. I'm just
I'm just letting them die.
Dieting, shapeshifting.
Yes.
Never mind.
Yeah,
never mind. So anyway, until then, please everybody be safe. Have a great Thanksgiving. And until December 3rd, we hope to see you then. I'm Brian Clune.
I'm Pete Haviland.
And thank you so much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed the show. And Mitchell, again, thank you so much.
Oh, thanks, guys. It was a pleasure.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting. The best in paranormal talk radio.